Day 8 of the Korryn Gaines civil trial, dominated by dueling use of force experts. Joe Key for the defense, Dr. Tyrone Powers for the plaintiffs.
Clearly, we feel our expert is strong in his testimony, and they're trying to find some weakness in his testimony, but it's just not there.
The sides doing battle over whether this SWAT officer, identified as Officer Royce Ruby, at Korryn Gaines' apartment door, was justified when he shot and killed her, ending a day-long armed standoff. In testimony today, Dr. Powers said Officer Ruby's use of force was excessive and unnecessary and a violation of county policy. Ruby's defense, he fired when he saw Korryn Gaines' braids and the barrel of her shotgun, fearing officers behind the hinge side of this door were vulnerable. Not possible, Dr. Powers said on the stand today, citing depositions from the rest of the SWAT team. Officer Callahan indicated that would have been impossible, Powers said. Other officers said there was no one at the hinge. The other officers had moved out of the way. Another suggested time was on their side. There was no rush. In fact, one officer even ordered a cooling truck, thinking the standoff would go even longer.
For these officers to be out there for 6 hours with Korryn, establishing a rapport with her, it seems extremely inconsistent that upon expiration of 6 hours, that they would shoot her.
Well, her son, Cody, was also shot in the elbow. It shattered his elbow. Late this afternoon, Cody's dad was called as a witness. He said since the shooting, his son has been skittish, scared of sirens and loud noises. He's been withdrawn. He also said he keeps asking for his mom and, quote, no longer wants to be a police officer. When asked, what did Cody say the night, or the morning of the shooting? Cody's dad said, he asked me, Daddy, can we go back and get my bones from my old apartment? Reporting live from Towson tonight, I'm Kate Amara, WBAL TV 11 News.